Thank you all for being here with us. I'm honored to be able to represent this research. I'm going to talk at you for a while, so it's going to look like I did all this work, which is a nice story. This is a lot of work, and a lot of people did it. Anika from Demos, our other Demos colleagues who are with us in spirit, our research team, Lake Research Partners, Brilliant Corners, and another colleague, Ian Haney-Lopez, who's a Berkeley law professor, and wrote the book Dog Whistle Politics, which is sort of the germ of the idea that became the hypothesis we tested, that became the data that we are going to share with you today. So I don't think I need to remind us, but just to set some context, that we are in a very, very ugly moment of race baiting. And it is on our televisions, and it is in our Twitter, and it's on our Facebook feeds, and it's on the front pages. And it is perhaps best encapsulated by our dog whistler in chief. But I want to be clear, this is not a new phenomenon. And we would not have this situation were this country not built off of decades and centuries of racial oppression. That is the founding story of this place, and it is in our DNA. So here you have him hitting all the points in a succinct tweet, right? Vilification of immigrants, vilification of welfare, reduced down even past welfare to the dole, the media arm of the state propping it up. But of course, as you know, this is far from a national phenomenon, and indeed, you have it here.
Here illegally, Manuel Orrego Zavala was deported twice and had multiple convictions and arrests. Drunk, he hit and killed Jeffrey Monroe and Colts linebacker Edwin Jackson. It was a senseless tragedy, and it never should have happened. Politicians in Washington have ignored this issue for far too long. We must build the wall, ban sanctuary cities, and put an end to chain migration. There are lives at stake. I'm Mike Braun, and I approve this message.
So we see across states, for example, in Minnesota, Tim Pawlenty, who's running for governor, when he ran originally, because he was governor before, he ran on balanced budget. This time around, he's running on sanctuary cities. Sanctuary cities is the balanced budget of 2018. It is not an ancillary story, it is the central story that they're running on. So it's worthwhile to refresh ourselves about what dog whistling is. We're in a moment, as you know, in which race is more powerful than ever. And I say that because we see a surge of government violence against people of color. And by that I mean police violence, I mean the carceral state, I mean what is happening at our border to people of color. And at the same time, we see an increased public commitment to whiteness. So what I mean by that is that over the last 10 years, when we've been looking at this phenomenon, when we've been studying this phenomenon, more people who are white say that they self-identify as white, that they're proud of their whiteness, and that they make political decisions based upon their whiteness and on the preservation of their white identity. Now, as Ian would say, and I would echo, there are many, many problems with colorblindness, and I'm about to talk about lots of them, but one of its attractions, one of its legitimate good things, was that in the post-civil rights era, we went through a period in which it was socially unacceptable to be excited about your whiteness. You weren't supposed to be white and proud. That was relegating you to sort of a fringe, undesirable, not socially sanctioned way of being. We were supposed to believe ourselves to all be children of God, and our race didn't matter. And again, colorblindness has its problems, because what it is an erasure of the legitimate different experience of people of color. But what we're seeing now is more disturbing still, because, as I'm guessing is not news to you, there is no such thing as a white identity rooted in anything other than white supremacy. There's Italian identity or there's Irish identity. In my case, I'm Jewish. I feel an identity around that. And those are authentic cultural markers. They have traditions, they have beliefs, they have family, they have story. But white identity is an invented concept, as you know, that was invented for the marginalization of people of color, which makes it not parallel or analogous to, say, for example, black identity, which was also invented, but is rooted in a history of struggle against oppression. The same thing with Latino identity, again, an invented concept. My husband is from Honduras, and when he moved to the United States and people started telling him about being Latino, he was like, when did I become Latino? I thought I was Honduran. I was like, oh no, honey, we can't be bothered with those distinctions. That's very time consuming. He's like, oh, okay. So on the one hand, race is more powerful than ever, and yet there's less room to confront racism. And in fact, our opponents relish when we say, that's racist, you're racist, what he's doing is racist, Trump is a racist, because they then get to say to their aggrieved white base, see, they're being racist against me. Now, white people are the aggrieved minority who are continuously being put upon, right? And people of color are fixated on race, and white people are the ones that are being called out because of our race. So racism is both more pervasive and harder to challenge. But in order to confront this, we need to remember back to the core of dog whistling. The core of dog whistling is not merely to create animosity and hatred of people of color. That's just an ancillary side benefit. See, one person gets my humor. One. It's good. We have to laugh, otherwise we would just crawl into the fetal position. It's an ancillary side benefit that it generates animosity towards people of color. The crux of dog whistling is about the vilification of the collective. It's about how we can't have an us because there's a them. There's a them that doesn't work. There's a them that collects too much food stamps. There's a them that are welfare queens. There's a them that do inner city crime. There's a them that are coming over here lawlessly and committing crimes. And so of course we don't want universal single-payer health care. And of course we don't want broad sweeping labor protections that would be applicable to working people. We can't have an us. We can't have government. We can't have collective. The purpose of dog whistling at its core is to undermine faith in government. And I'll show you a video, and I want to apologize in advance. This is an unpleasant video. So this is from Lee Atwater, who was Reagan's chief strategist and the architect of the Willie Horton ad, which now seems kind of sweet, right? In retrospect, sort of cuddly. Talking about his strategy.
You start out in 1954 by saying nigger, nigger, nigger. By 1968, you can't say nigger. That hurts your backfire. So you say stuff like force busing, states' rights, and all that stuff. And you're getting so abstract now. You're talking about cutting taxes, and all of these things you're talking about are totally economic things. And the byproduct of them is blacks get hurt worse than whites. We want to cut this, and we want is much more abstract than even the busing thing. And a hell of a lot more abstract than nigger, nigger.
This has always been the strategy, right? Taking people of color and making them the scapegoat, pointing the finger at certain groups to say, the reason you don't have a good job, the reason you can't make ends meet, the reason that your life isn't going the way that you expected to is because of Juan. Now, on what planet could Juan have taken your job? Juan's sitting there in front of Home Depot just trying to get some day labor. Jeff Bezos took your job. It's obvious. But as long as you keep pointing your finger at the brown guy, you're never going to point your finger at the bad guy. And that's the essence of it. So while we may get more upset and incensed by the first ad, that we saw here from Indiana, actually what is more insidious and nefarious is the vilification of government and the use of people of color as a scapegoat in order to perpetuate this.
Politics shouldn't be a career. We need folks with real-world experience who get the job done and come back home. I've always been a conservative Republican, and I'm running because President Trump paved the way. Together, we'll build the wall, defend our values, and end bad trade deals for American workers. And the only person I'll owe anything to is you. I'm Mike Braun. I approve this message, and I ask for your vote.
Politics shouldn't be a profession. People shouldn't work in government. Government shouldn't be a thing we have. We should have business people running government because we should run government like a business. So what did we set out to do? Huh? Oh, yeah. No, I'm good. I'm a very effective white man. I can turn on all the things. So what did we set out to do in this environment? So we set out to do this giant research project. It turns out that Mike Pence is actually right, and that a straight woman should not go to dinner with a straight man who are married to other people, because then you end up in a year-long research project that destroys your life. Had I not had dinner with Ian Haney Lopez, I would be a pleasant person who didn't have to present this 23 times in like 18 cities in America over the course of a month. Anika and I, we'd still be nice to each other. We wouldn't trick taxi drivers in Indianapolis into thinking we were sisters. Strangest car ride of our lives on the way over here. I convinced the guy that our parents didn't love her and they didn't put sunscreen on her. And he was like, oh, yeah, okay. You guys might want to do something about your education system, just,
That's why I'm here.
yeah, because that's real weird. Okay, so we wanted to figure out, first and foremost, how do we speak to and mobilize our base? As Shoshana told us, our issue is not that people don't think we're right, it's that they don't show up, right? So how do we move that base that agrees with us from agreement to action? Equally important, how do we persuade the largest possible group of the middle, which is mostly white, especially in Indiana, to embrace both our economic and racial justice solutions? I am fond of saying that the job of a good message is not to say what is popular. The job of a good message is to make popular what we need said. That is our fixed point. And because what we need said is immigrant rights, and is an end to police violence, and is bail reform, and is a whole litany of things, all of which have economic components, but which are in and of themselves their own issues, then an economic-only message could never possibly do the job for us, because it wouldn't move people across the host of our issues. And at the same time, we need to recognize that politics is not solitaire. What we are saying does not exist in some sort of research vacuum. We need to understand how our messages land in the environment where, when someone has just knocked on the door and said, "Excuse me, sir, I'm here to talk to you about MS-13 and how gang members from Central America are coming to kill you," and one of our people comes and says, "I'm here to talk to you about free college." And they're like, "Free college sounds good, but I'm dead." Then what we are saying are pure economic populism, which is sort of the kind of de rigueur now for the left, couldn't possibly work because it exists in a universe of continuous race baiting. So we need to understand that our messages do not exist in a vacuum. They contend in a space in which white supremacy is the business of the day, right? So we set out to craft a narrative that addresses race as well as class, and it beat the opposition narrative. Obviously, you need to do that. And it beats the colorblind economic populism that is the progressive sort of go-to right now. So we did this work nationally. I'm going to talk a little bit about national results, but only as a comparison to Indiana to try to make myself feel less depressed. It's a rough set of data you guys delivered to me. Whew! And we did a deeper dive in 4 states, Minnesota, Ohio, California, and this one. And this one. And this. Indiana did not win the survey. Huh? Well, in those 4 states, in some ways, and in other ways, you guys totally won, because you know what? You have nowhere to go but up. There is so much room here. In California, we're dealing with like woker than thou, and people being like, that's not socialist enough. So, you know, everybody has their struggles. By the way, because I probably won't remember, on my own website, I wrote a handbook last year called Messaging This Moment, which is just a compilation of years of, I'm a cognitive linguist by training, so years of research on how messages work and what they need to do. I won't really cover that today because I'm covering this specific new body, but this is all built off of a foundation of kind of how messages should work, generically applied specifically to these issues, yeah? And also there are handouts and you're going to get them, right? Oh, you get, Shoshana. You never give the handouts at the beginning because then everybody looks at the handouts and doesn't listen to me. Good. Yeah. Nobody should be looking at the handout. Pay attention to me. This is what my husband says I'm like all day. He's like, you just pay attention to me. Okay, so multi-step process began with analysis. What is the range of ways we've been trying to make these arguments? I focus particularly on metaphor. That's the you are here dot. This is the range of ways we're trying to have this argument. Then we did a series of elicitation interviews. What do we wish people believed? How do we wish that they reasoned? Both with national folks and in our states. Then from there, we created a series of hypotheses. Which are the narratives that are going to work? Which are the wording choices that will be better, worse? We tested them qualitatively in various different modes. And then finally, where the rubber hits the road is in quantitative, and that is where we will focus today. So this is the backbone. This is the core of the right-wing narrative. We talked about it. This is just putting it in one place. Racial fears, fears about using too many public services, fears about taking jobs. You know, Schrodinger's immigrant, right? Taking your job and also not working. It's magical. It's amazing, right? They're not doing anything. They're collecting all of the sweet, sweet welfare cash that this generous country provides. And they're taking your job. Amazing. I mean, I feel like if you could do both of those things simultaneously, you kind of should be here. Yeah, because that's amazing. So stoking racial fears in order to create distrust of and disgust with government, breed economic resentment, and on and on and on. And indeed, we see in this data, both nationally and here in Indiana and all of our other states, that beliefs about race, whether you think racism is an issue, whether you are concerned about race, whether you're concerned about prejudice, whether you believe in an activist government or that government should get out of the way, and where you think money comes from, why are rich people rich, why are poor people poor, are tightly correlated. Here are the numbers from Indiana. B is our base, O is opposition. So the base largely believes the government exists to create opportunities for advancement as opposed to it should get out of our way. 56% of the base, whereas 64% of the opposition believes it should get out of the way, right? Rich people are rich. Why? Because they were given more opportunities than others, or because they worked harder and displayed superior intellect. 56% of the base thinks rich people are rich because they're made out of because they got lucky breaks. Opposition, more than half of them, rich people are rich because they're made out of awesome. Do we pay too much attention to race? Too little. 68% of the base says too little. 58% of the opposition says too much. So these attitudes are tightly correlated. And it's no wonder this has been the right-wing story for a very long time. Where this has left us as the left is with a group of people who have contended with an endless relitigation of the previous election. That's first where it's left us. With a group of people who say, we need to recapture the working class, which somehow means white people, because black and brown people, they're not working class, they're Kanye. And so we need to recapture them, and so we need to talk about bread and butter issues, and if we just return to our roots, talking about, eschewing quote-unquote identity politics, which in a normal functional country would be called human rights, but in this one, that's not a thing. So those people who say we got ourselves into this mess by talking about gender, by talking about race, by talking about immigrants, shouldn't do that. Just return to economic populism. And that will also attract people of color because money issues are money issues, right? Then we have a group of people who say, yeah, money issues are money issues, and police killing us is not exactly a money issue. There are issues that are legitimately racial issues which have economic overlay but are their own separate issues. And our task is to fire up the base. Our problem is that our base doesn't turn out, and they're not going to turn out for some elderly white dude yelling about socialism, for example. I know, I just went straight there. And you know what? I'm on my best behavior because I'm in a church. This is the longest I have ever spoken without swearing. And then we have this group of people, this newer group that says, we need to do both. This is our walk and chew gum people. We need to walk and chew gum. We need to do both. And usually the sum total of their advice to us is that. Do both. And so where that has left us is with what I've come to call the dependent clause strategy. The dependent clause strategy goes like this. We name an economic issue, we put in a comma, and we say something about black people. It goes like this. It's growing increasingly harder for people to make ends meet. Wages aren't keeping up with the cost of living. College is increasingly out of reach. People are going bankrupt through healthcare, comma, and it's especially acute in communities of color. Right? How many of you have dependent claused? Yes, me too. See, I too have dependent claused. This has been the only means that we could think of to try to weave this together. The problems with the dependent clause strategy are that, number one, for people of color, it feels like an afterthought because it's an afterthought.
It's always after the comma.
It's always after the comma. And it's a dependent clause. It couldn't even stand on its own, right? Doesn't have a verb. The second issue is that for many whites, they're like, you literally were just talking about college affordability, and now you're talking about immigrants. What just happened? Or you were just talking about healthcare and bankruptcy, and now you're talking about black people. What just happened? And when we simply name a disparity, when we say it's especially acute for communities of color, or this is especially challenging, or the wage gap is even bigger for African American women, when we just name a disparity and we do not provide causation, people fill in the story for themselves. And why do you think, what comes to mind for them when we say, and it's especially terrible for black people? What do you think they tell themselves about that?
Well, black people are the reason for their own problem.
Right. They didn't try as hard, they didn't work as hard, they didn't go to school, they didn't do the things they were supposed to do. Out of wedlock childbirth, whatever the story is, whatever story is top of mind is the story, whatever story is most available within the cultural context is the story that will get filled in when we do not provide an origin story. You guys are supposed to know about origin stories. Yeah. So what we are positing to you today is not a race and class message. It's not a race ampersand class message. It is a race class message, a message that explains the causal relationship between these things. In a nutshell, this is the race class message, that we need cross-racial solidarity, as you'll see momentarily, called out in those specific terms. Join together with people of different races. Not some generic, we need to all join together, we need to be a community, we need to reach across aisles. No, join together across racial differences in order to reflect, create, become, have a government that looks like all, works for all, toward always shared prosperity and racial justice. So that's the bare bones of it. Now, what makes us think that we could get away with a narrative like this? What makes us think that this could work? Well, the first thing, and this is a national example because this finding came out so strongly we didn't re-ask it in states. Nationally, the public is with us at division. When we went into our focus groups and we asked the warm-up softball, how are things going these days? At least 3, if not half or more, of every focus group would say, instead of saying the normal answer to that question, I've done focus groups for many years, the normal answer to that question is, times are tough, we're not making ends meet, my partner got laid off, etc. Now what we hear from people, and remember, this is before they know the topic. We could be talking to them about toothpaste. They have no idea. They say, you know, I'm really worried about this country. We're more divided from each other than ever. I've never seen us so divided. So when we're talking to people about division, they don't come back and say, I don't know what you're talking about. We're not divided. Things are going swell. So people are with us at division, right? We don't need to manufacture a feeling that we are divided. This is an acute public sentiment. And what you can see here is there's a belief that this division is not accidental, it's intentional. It is a manufactured division. And, now this is Indiana data, Hoosiers want to work together across racial differences in order to create fair and equitable laws. What you're seeing here is that 79% of the sample here in Indiana, which was, this was done in early May of this year, and it's a sample of 600 Hoosier adults, and the margin of error is plus minus 4. The national sample, when we factor in the oversamples, is 2,000, and that was done in March. So 79% of adults want this. 47% give it a perfect 10 out of 10, right? Among our base, that's 95%. Among persuadables, don't worry, I'll define these categories for you. 83% of persuadables want it, 39% give it a perfect 10. So people want this. So those are 2 of our points. Nationally and in Indiana, people believe in and desire to act collectively toward better economic outcomes. Even here in our bootstraps, you're on your own, you do it yourself. If you want to get ahead, nose to the grindstone, go off on your own. By working together, we can restore the balance in our economy so that everyone can benefit. 91% of people nationally believe this, 85% of the Hoosier base believes it. Sorry, 91% of the national base, 85% of the Hoosier base, 81% of national persuadables, 82% of Hoosier persuadables. Yeah? People want this. So that's the first inkling that this sort of divide, intentional division, we need to overcome this division, can work. Now let's meet our groupings. I mentioned the base before. Who is this base? The base happened to be 34% of the Indiana sample. Now in some ways this Indiana data is best of times, worst of times. The national base is 23%. Your base is bigger. How did you get into the base? You got into the base by getting all the questions right. So people in the base think that not enough attention is paid to race. They're concerned about bias no matter how we word it. They believe that black people and Latinos, people of color, face greater challenges than whites. They support our policy agenda by strong margins. They also happen to be more likely to be women, African American, under 30, and live in the northwest part of the state. We didn't pick them for these reasons. Does that make sense? The only way into the base is to get the questions right. We then check what you're like. We don't put you in the base because you're like this. Yeah? Our theory of change is that we need the base to move from agreement. The base agrees with us. I just told you we defined the base as the people who agree with us. The base likes all of our messages. Congratulations, us. We defined the base as the people who like our messages. We need to move the base from agreeing to wanting to repeat. This is our choir. Now, people are always like, oh, you're preaching to the choir. I don't think I need to tell you, the choir's where the trouble starts. If you can't get the choir singing on key, in tune, a lot, over and over and over and over, they're not going to convert the congregation. Because the name of the game is that we need our choir to be saying, this is the way the world works, this is the way the world works, this is the way the world works. Because I can assure you that their choir is singing real loud all the time. As dedicated and smart and hardworking as you all are, there are not enough activists to win this fight. The activist cannot be the main messenger. The job of the activist is to get the base to say this to the middle. Because the base is a trusted messenger. We, at least those of us who work in advocacy, it's like, well, of course you're saying that. That's literally your job. But when your cousin says it to you, it seems less suspect. You're like, well, you must just really think that, right? So this is our base, this is our choir. 44%. Nationally, the persuadables are 59%. Here, they're 44%. These are the people who are of mixed minds. So half of them, nearly half, 37% want government to be more involved. 43% says the role of governments get out of the way. The plurality believe we pay too much attention to race. 26% say we pay too little. 83% say it's important to work together across racial differences. Yet 35% say people of color are responsible for their own conditions. 39% say rich people are rich because right place at the right time. 36% say rich people are made out of awesome. Demographically, they're much like the state, but they're more likely to be men and conservative. Now, I told you some best of times, your base is much bigger than the national base. These persuadables are more conservative than persuadables in other places. So the name of the game is that these people, 44%, right? So let's do math. 34, 44. We need some of these people. We need our choir to be singing at these people. Because what's going on with these people is that we have a false model of persuadables as being in the middle. I can assure you there is no middle between immigrants contribute to our culture and community, we're all the better for having them here, and we should forcibly separate families at the border and torture babies. There's no middle. That's an on-off switch. What's going on with these people cognitively is that they toggle between competing orientations of the way the world works. And what they hear more of more often becomes more true for them. So here is an example. This is what we call a split sample. Half the sample gets one question, the other half gets the other. That's why we don't get things adding to 100%. For the people who heard focusing on and talking about race is necessary to move forward to greater equality, among the persuadables, if they heard that, 48% of them were like, yup. Among the persuadables who heard focusing on talking about race doesn't fix anything, 59% of them said, yep. So more or less, the persuadables are the people who are like, ooh, good point, good point, good point. They're not in the middle. They hold both orientations, and our job is to bring our orientation to the fore. That leaves 22%, okay? This 22% is what I call a committed opposition. This is a larger committed opposition than I like to see. These are the people who got every question wrong. Huh? According to life. Actually, let me put it this way. According to Jesus, they got every question wrong. Yeah.
How much was the percentage nationally for this one?
This one nationally is 18? Yeah, 18. You do have a higher than national.
That's Indiana.
This is Indiana, 22. So these are the people, and I know this is hard, especially for those of you who are clergy, which is most of you. You can't have these people.
You do have these people in your church, but you can't have them.
Yeah. These are not your people. Okay. We can, huh? No, I understand they're there. I'm not saying you cannot eliminate these people. Let's just be clear. The name of the game is to engage the base in order to persuade the middle. And one of the ways that we ensure that we are doing that is by seeing that the opposition does not like what we're saying. We need to see them turning away from us. Why? If the people who disagree with you about everything like what you are saying, what are you saying? Either you are saying free pie, right? I believe the children are the future. In other words, nothing. You're saying some blandly inoffensive truism, and everyone's like, okay, but you're not advancing a political conversation. You are not activating your worldview among the persuadables. You are not engaging. If you want to touch a nerve, you have to touch a nerve. If no one is turned off by what you are saying nothing. I know that this is not how you think about the world, probably. I personally enjoy upsetting people very greatly. Politics is about comforting the afflicted and afflicting the comfortable. Some people need to be afflicted, right? Like, we got to throw some people out of the temple. There's some moneylenders who don't need to be there.
Don't you think that increases the divide as well, though?
It's a great question. We're going to come back to it. So, we are not focusing on these people. These people are simply a double check that our messages aren't merely persuasive, they're actually progressive. All right, so we need to beat the opposition message, which means we need to test the opposition message. When I hit go, you will hear that message. You will see lines move across the screen. The instructions people are given is to move your slider up when you feel warmly and in agreement with what you are hearing, to move the slider down when you feel the opposite. The colors correspond: red to opposition, green to persuadables, blue to base. The number in parentheses is the mean. So if you were to add together all of those seconds, that's the average of the rating. Yeah? So this is the opposition message.
Our leaders must prioritize keeping us safe and ensuring that hard-working Hoosiers have the freedom to prosper. Making sure job creators can flourish in our state and people who simply refuse to work can't game the system is just common sense. And so is saying a hard no to dangerous sanctuary city policies so our communities are no longer flooded with people who refuse to follow our laws. We need to make sure we take care of our own people first, especially the people who politicians in Washington have cast aside for too long to cater to whatever special interest groups line their pockets, yell the loudest, or riot in the street.
So, there are many disturbing things about Indiana. Like I said, I don't care about pissing people off, including you. There there is no other baseline, not California, not Minnesota, not Ohio, and certainly not national, that likes this much. Every other base is here. So like this, I mean, the base clearly doesn't like it as much as the opposition and persuadables, but like this is crazy to see the base above 50 on this message. We tested permutations of this message nationally and in our 3 other states, and it did not look like this. Okay, so you guys have work to do with your base. The fact that there's even sort of attraction here, that's not good, right? The choir is not supposed to like this song. So this is a potent message. It works, right? It engages their base. Their base wants to repeat this, and it's persuasive. This is sort of the name of the game, what we're trying to be. Now, after the moment-to-moment dials, we set the dial to be intentionally fast so it overrides language processing, meaning people can't tell us what they think that they think. It's going by too fast, they're just moving their hand. So afterwards, we asked them on a scale of 0 to 100, how convincing did you find this message? Yes? And these are our convincing ratings for the entire sample, for the base, for the persuadables, for the opposition. Okay? So 22% of the opposition gave this a perfect 100 out of 100. 57% rated it net convincing, right? That's what these numbers mean. So what have we been trying to do?
We live in the richest country.
Sorry about that. Some of them are set automatically, some of them are not. So this, oh, you want to ask me a question? Okay.
What?
Can you specify more than that? It's going to be hard for me to answer that. Does the chart not make sense to you?
It makes
Oh, okay, okay.
Yeah, it makes more sense than I wanted to make.
Right. You live here.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry.
No, actually, I'm sorry. I get to fly back to Oakland, where they've eliminated gender from my children's public school. And, like, they're not allowed to talk about, you know, do you like this girl, do you like that? Yeah, like, where they go to Black Lives Matter rallies as part of school activities. So, no, I'm sorry. Yes.
So I come from the wealthy suburb that votes Republican. So I see this.
Yeah.
Recognize this. Is there any conversation about why?
Why this works?
No, well, like you have this hard group that's hard right. Is there conversation around why does people feel that way? Like I know why, in my gut, why. Are you going to talk about that at all, or why this?
I could talk about it. The time that we have, that's like below here for me. I care about energizing your base in order to persuade the middle. These people, like, they need to take that up with a therapist. Do I know why? Yes, I know why, because I happen to be doing a concurrent project on the discourse of white nationalism in the US, UK, and Australia. If you want to talk about that, we can. It doesn't seem like the best use of our time, because you cannot have these people, and I want you to detach yourselves from being the kids no one wanted to sit next to in middle school. I mean, like, we just tell the people the truth. We just explain to the people that we have the solutions we just tell the people the thing, and then they will like us. They will understand that actually stimulative economic policy is economically beneficial, and that jail costs more than school. We tell the people the facty facts.
I mean, I'm gonna be honest with you. Like, I'm a black man who has been involved in the criminal justice system.
Yeah.
Lived below the poverty level for years. And it's real hard for me to digest that.
I'm sorry, but can we get to the part that's less depressing? You guys really want to focus on, but this is part of the problem.
Well, I think what I want to ask her in your expertise,
Yeah.
you said this briefly, and I wonder if that's what we're trying to get at, and that is, they
Yes. Familiarity bias is very, very, what's happening? You guys, I'm desperate to keep us on time, and you guys are doing everything in your power to thwart me. And I am not easily thwarted. Okay, reclaiming my time. All right, so what have we been trying to do? Now, arguably, this next message is sort of an encapsulation in 100+ words of what the left has been trying to say both nationally and here in Indiana. And this is how it does.
We live in the richest country in the history of the world. But that means little because much of that wealth is controlled by a tiny handful of individuals. Despite advancements in technology and productivity, millions of Americans are working longer hours for lower wages. Wall Street and the billionaire class have rigged the rules to redistribute wealth and income to the wealthiest and most powerful people of this country. We must send a message to these greedy billionaires that you cannot take advantage of all the benefits of America if you refuse to accept your responsibilities as Americans.
So this does alienate our opposition. Nice.
They are pretty steady in what they oppose.
Yeah, no, they know what they don't like. And our base, as we would expect, our base likes all of our messages. Again, definition of our base, right? Our base is at 64 average with this. Their base was at 65 on their message. That's well within the margin of error. That's basically the same number. But the persuadables are far below at almost every point than they were with the opposition message. And here's a side-by-side of the opposition ratings, the ratings of the opposition message, which you saw previously, and the ratings on this one. So obviously our base likes this much better. We would expect that. The opposition doesn't like it. Well done. But look where we are, right? We're neck and neck. And they have more money, and they have more media, and so they can have more repetition. So we need to see this in the stratosphere, and we need to see this outperforming that. And that's not where we are. So what do? We do this.
Indiana's strength comes from our ability to work together, to knit together a landscape of people from different places, different beliefs, and of different races into a whole. For this to be a place of freedom for all, we cannot let the greedy few and the politicians they pay for divide us against each other based on what someone looks like, where they come from, or how much money they have. It's time to stand up for each other and come together. It's time for us to pick leaders who reflect the very best of every kind of Hoosier. Together, we can make this a place where freedom is for everyone, no exceptions.
Our base a moment ago on colorblind populism, on not mentioning race, was at 64. Here they are at 74, right? The persuadables were at 60. Here they're at 63. But where the real difference comes in is here. What do you mean? This is, again, the rating of the opposition message against the rating of this message, right? So colorblind populism was just not motivating the base enough, and it was less persuasive. Now, we didn't just test a bunch of white dudes. We tested all sorts of different people. In this particular message, this is another way in which the Indiana data makes no sense. Normally, we have a consistent pattern on messenger testing. In Indiana, we have no pattern. On this message, we have identical words, same words. So people who say they can't see race, they can hear it. This I've never seen in 10 years of this, I've never seen the base prefer a white man to anybody. The base always prefers a woman, a man of color, always, except here.
I'm missing is, what's the difference between those two messages? Is it the hearer?
Only the messenger, just the speaker, just the speaker. Identical script, different speaker. Now, this doesn't make any sense. The persuadables don't care. They don't care here. They don't care here. In fact, they like it better here. The base, this to me could very well be an issue of what we call noise, like not a true finding, because this is really incongruous. The opposition is performing as we would expect. They are displeased here. They don't love this, but they love it a little better when a white guy's saying it. Now, the reason why I would still tell you that you are fine with an African-American man, an African-American woman, a Latina, because we also tested those. By the way, the full report, everything is on the DEMOS website for the C3, the DEMOS action website for the C4. Way more detail on every message we tested, messengers, how they performed. When I tell you this is incongruous, this is another message, which I will briefly touch on in a minute. Right now, what I'm showing you is a different message. You did not hear this message. But again, two narrators, and here we see the base doing what we're used to, which is preferring the African-American man. So I do not conclude from this data that somehow the base is still performing. I'm not sure exactly what's going on with the messenger, but this is what I would expect. I would expect among the base, a non-white male messenger does better. Among the persuadables, they don't care. It doesn't really matter. And among the opposition, they are also not doing what they normally do, which is punish us worse here, which we like because we are alienating them. Yeah? In other words, I can't tell you what's going on with Messenger, but this does not make me concerned about advising you that you should still use the messenger that is authentic to the community always. All right. So we heard Indiana's strength by many measures. It is your top testing message. It's tier 1. We have 3 other messages that I would call tier 2 for different reasons, and this is one of them.
United we stand, divided we fall. This doesn't mean we always agree. It means that when we come together, we have the power to make things better. But today, wealthy special interests and the politicians they fund divide us with fear-mongering based on what people look like, where they're from, or how they worship, while they rig the rules to benefit themselves. We must come together to demand a political system where every person is affirmed as an equal, ending corporate lobbying and pay-to-play donations. We deserve representatives that reflect who they serve. Leaders who've walked in our shoes and understand our challenges. That's how we ensure our schools, our workplaces, and our society enable all of us to prosper.
So the other reason why we keep the hard right in our sample as opposed to other pollsters who just, what they do is when they're doing the intake, if you're hard right, they terminate you and you don't take the rest of the survey. I don't do that. I need them as a check. So the other reason why we look for this pattern is because this is what tells us that 88% of listeners are like, that's fine. 88% of Hoosiers are like, okay. And then this 22% looks like outliers. This is the strategy they have been wielding against us for decades. They dial for the red meat. They want to turn us away. Have you ever suspected that they were like, oh, I want to find a thing that everyone likes me saying? Have you not noticed that the purpose of what they say is to make us insane? Yeah. Part of that, and it's very effective, is to throw us off our game, so we will give up our airtime to say, can you believe he just said immigrants are animals, immigrants are animals, immigrants are animals? Can you believe he just said women shouldn't have any rights, women shouldn't have any rights, women? Do you see what happens? We get so mad that all we do is give them free airtime. We keep having their conversation because they are making us insane. What you repeat, you reaffirm. What you negate, you bring to the fore. Every time you say no human is illegal, you are reassuring people that humans are illegal. That is a terrible statement. The correct statement is all people have rights. That is what we are for. We need to stop talking about what we oppose and say what we are for. People want to be on the winning team. So I show you this message because it's particularly good with persuadables. The base is fine with it. They're not as hot on it as Indiana Strength, but this is what we would call a more persuasive message as opposed to galvanizing message. Now I'm going to walk you through two other messages, and it's fine to focus on the text, but really what I want you to focus on is the architecture of the message. So this happens to be working people. We looked at the side-by-side on this. This is how the message goes. No matter where we come from, what our color or religious tradition, most of us work hard for our families. Messages that work begin discussing race overtly and as including everyone. So that is step one of every one of the messages that work. Step two, it names racial scapegoating as a weapon that economically harms all of us. In this case, the way we word that is, but today certain politicians and their greedy lobbyists hurt everyone by handing kickbacks to the rich, defunding our schools, threatening our seniors with cuts to Medicare, Social Security. Then they turn around and point the finger for our hard times at poor families, black people, and new immigrants. There are two versions of the divide story. There's one that's softer that we see in Indiana Strength, which is they divide us from each other. They divide us based on what we look like. This is the more in-your-face version. This is scapegoating. Shame and blame, point the finger. This message is more galvanizing and less persuasive, meaning the base is more fired here, it's slightly less persuasive. So different messages for different moments. Then we emphasize unity and collective action. I'm going to come back to your question about being divisive. We need to join together with people from all walks of life. If I had it to do over, I would say we need to join together across racial differences to fight for our future. Just like we won, in this message does one extra thing. This green is not in the other messages. It invokes previous cross-racial solidarity to combat cynicism. Our main problem with our base, and especially with people of color, is not that people don't think our ideas are right, it's that they don't think our ideas are possible. And so in the absence of a universe in which every public school is great and every kid can get a great education for free, it makes perfect sense to say, I need to hold on to every single dollar I could possibly have and hate taxes because I have to pay for private school. It's not that I don't want public school or don't believe in it, it's that right now I have a kid, and so I need to figure out what I'm going to do, and that means I need all of my money. It's not that people don't think our ideas are right, it's that they don't think that they're possible. So one of the things we need to contend with is cynicism. And what we found in qualitative, and it bears out in the quantitative, is that even the simplest reference to having previously had cross-racial solidarity and some measure of forward movement is effective. Now, I am not talking about a make-believe world where we make reference to the New Deal as if it helped everybody. I'm not talking about lying. I'm talking about one time some white people got on a bus and we did a thing. Yeah? Okay. And then finally, it connects working together with government. By joining together, we can elect new leaders who work for all of us, not just the wealthy few. So minus green, every winning message follows this same pattern. Here is that pattern with another winning message. This one, again, very persuasive, especially. This got our highest share ratings. We measure on a lot of metrics. Propensity to share, this was the persuadables top choice. So again, it begins by discussing race overtly and as including everyone. In this message, that sounds like every child, regardless of where they come from, what they look like, or where they live, deserves to pursue their dreams and live their lives as God intended. It names racial scapegoating, right? Seeing the pattern? Same pattern. But certain politicians and their greedy lobbyists are putting our children's future at risk. They rig the rules to enrich themselves while they distract us. Another way of expressing the divide and conquer. By generating fear based on race, background, and religion. Again, same pattern, emphasizes unity, collective action. Together we have the power to pick leaders who have faith in all our children. Again, connects working together with government. When we come together, I would say across racial differences, we can make this a nation. We're proud to leave our kids brimming with the new ideas that come from so many different people working together for everyone's benefit. Yeah? We tested a lot of stuff. With the base, other than the opposition message, obviously, colorblind economic populism and one other message come together, which was 2 milquetoast for the base. Every message that named race did better than the colorblind message with our base and with persuadables. Every message that named race did better than the message that did not name race. With the base and with the persuadables. And the persuadables, which is 44% of your adult population, prefers the opposition message to the colorblind message. So that's... All right, we also tested your policy agenda. I want to leave you guys time for more questions, so I'm going to do this at warp speed. People really like your agenda. A lot. Yes, so this is the overall approval. This is the net approval by base, persuadable, and opposition. So 98% of the base net approves of this, 99, etc. Makes sense? Obviously, the opposition can't stand it. Good riddance. These are the total numbers in the entire sample, yeah? So ensure every working parent paid family and medical leave. Expand Medicaid. You guys, this is in your handout, so don't worry. Provide preschool for all, which is better than universal preschool. So every young child enters school ready to learn. Ensure people who are mentally ill or suffer from addiction receive treatment. We're starting to get lower, but we're still in clear majorities. And our base will carry this for us. They are very excited. Again, from the base, we don't need agreement. We need enthusiasm. We need repetition. Now, one of your main problems we know here is that xenophobia is working. The anti-immigrant story is working. And so one of the things that we've started doing in certain states, and we brought this in here, at its core, the anti-sanctuary argument is an argument about safety and what makes us feel safe and what doesn't make us feel safe. And the progressive instinct has been wrongly, having done many years of immigrant rights messaging here and abroad, our instinct has been to talk about immigration on the sanctuary issue. If we want to fight the sanctuary issue, we need to talk about safety. What makes us feel safe? This is Indiana. We know what makes us safe. What makes us safe is having neighbors you talk to. What makes us safe is living in a community where everybody looks out for each other and we won't let outsiders divide us. When they start talking anti-sanctuary, we start talking about we know what keeps us safe. We don't say immigrants this and immigrants that and immigrants this and immigrants that, okay? What we find, helpfully, so we ask people a series of things. Thinking about the safety of you and your family, please indicate if the following make you feel safer or less safe or have no effect on your safety. The top thing for both base and persuadables of every choice we gave them, including sanctuary, that makes them feel more safe is knowing your neighbors and having good relationships with them. This is what makes people feel safe. We need to have a thing to say that is pro, that is not anti. We need to be for a thing. Having strong public services to meet people's needs like education, healthcare, mental health, food and housing assistance, that makes people feel safe.
So, if you are not talking about the opposition,
Yeah.
saying that the immigrant population is keeping the community unsafe, if you don't say anything about that, how do you bring that out into the open?
I don't understand. So give me this scenario.
Okay, for example, we saw Mike Brown talking about how the immigrant population is keeping Indiana unsafe.
Right.
They are dangerous and all.
Yeah.
So what I'm hearing is that we shouldn't we shouldn't oppose that and say, no, that is not true. You know.
Yeah, you should never say that.
So, but that means we are not.
She's saying, how do you transition?
Yeah, and that's what I will, yes, now I understand your question. Media training. How many of you have been media trained? Whatever the question is irrelevant. You never answer the question. Whatever your talking points are, you guys, let's keep on time. Whatever your talking points are, you should know your talking points, and it is your job to deliver those 3 talking points regardless of what else is happening. You have your 3 talking points, it doesn't matter what else is happening. So Mike Braun says that, and I say, you know, it's an incredibly interesting point, and I too am deeply committed to the safety of Hoosiers. And Hoosiers know what keeps us safe. It's knowing our neighbors and looking out for each other. It's standing up for the person who's bullied, for the person who's picked on. And it's recognizing that those people who are trying to divide us, shaming and blaming immigrants, black people, people who are struggling to make ends meet for the problems that their greed has caused doesn't work here. I don't know where you're from, sir, perhaps Ohio, Kentucky, but here in Indiana, we look out for each other. And we recognize safety comes from robust services where we can take care of ourselves and take care of our families. That's what you say. All right, does that make sense? So what you don't say is sanctuary isn't an issue. Sanctuary does make us safe. Sanctuary does not. Immigrants are not criminals. Immigrants are not a security threat. Immigrants are not. Anytime you find yourself saying not or no, you are actually using their message. And that extends to myth busting. How many of you have myth busting fact sheets somewhere? The only myth worth busting is that works. That is free airtime to your opposition. What they are saying is irrelevant. I know it's very hard, but you can choose to be right or you can choose to be happy, and by happy I mean win. Detach yourself from the need to be right. Attach yourself to the desire to win. Cigarette tax. People are into it. Yeah. And they are more into it if they are told that the money is going to go to caring for people as opposed to infrastructure. No, you tax the, yeah, this was one of the policies we tested. So what do we learn overall? We learned that before and after the test, we ask a bunch of questions before and after. We ask the policy questions. We ask how excited are you to join together, in this case, across racial differences. What we see is that our base from beginning to end becomes much more excited. A lot of them already were very excited. The persuadables move 29 points to more excited to do this. The opposition, obviously, they didn't like it to start with, but even they move a little, which is mystifying. The conservative agenda requires dog whistling. We tested many of what we call these forced choice questions, where we say which of the following statements more closely reflects your views. When they say things like immigrants are, a security threat, blah, 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 then they're edging out in Indiana. Their pure economic statement, to make life better for working people, we need to cut taxes, reduce regulations, get government out of the way, versus to make life better for working people, we need to invest in education, create better jobs, make healthcare affordable. They can't win an econ argument in Indiana. They can't win a limited government argument in Indiana. 40 points. They have to have dog whistling in order to win. Here they are doing it. Sorry. What this is, I apologize. So now we're going back to this statement, but we actually did it as a split sample. Nationally and in our other states, when we add the statement for white, black, and brown people, this is how we gain points, right? So what's going on here is half the sample gets to make life better for working people, right? Tax cuts, all this business, versus to make life better for working people, the good stuff for white, black, and brown people struggling to make ends meet versus the good stuff just for people. What we see is that adding race increases our margins. That's true in California, it's true in Ohio, it's true in Minnesota, it's true nationally. And I do not know why in this state where still the race class messages all performed better than the colorblind message, it's not true here. What it does is just break us even. It doesn't move us. It doesn't give us more points. And I can't explain that other than this is a very strange place. Base and persuadables, again, we're back to Indiana data, not national. We need to return to the policies and values of the past when America was more secure. Even this is a light dog whistle. Return to the policies of the past when America was more secure and hard work paid off. This is a dog whistle. They need dog whistles, right? Remember how econ only, they couldn't hack it? We need to move forward to tackle new challenges. This is Make America Great Again. This is move forward. They don't have it, right? If we say move forward and not simply talk about new challenges. So what do we learn? I know I'm over. It's their fault, just FYI. Thank you. Let's have agency and place blame. A narrative is a story that can be told in many ways, like a parable, right? It has a framework. All of the winning narratives, not just in this project, but in every project I've ever done, begins with a shared value highlighting what people hold in common. It does not begin in the way that progressives love with, boy, have I got a problem for you. That's our favorite thing to say. This is the Titanic. Would you like to buy a ticket? Right? We're screwing immigrants. Labor is terrible. Poor people are suffering. We like to start every message with, boy, have I got a problem for you. The gospel is called the good news for a reason. People got 99 problems and they don't want yours. They really don't. They don't want your problem. We have to begin our messages, no matter our differences. Most of us want pretty similar things. Most of us believe that people who work for a living ought to earn a living, right? Here in the heartland of America, people know what matters. So you begin with a shared value. We're not alienating anyone yet. But today, you name a villain. You don't say, wages aren't keeping up with the cost of inflation. It's growing increasingly hard. The gap between rich and poor is widening. Racial disparities continue to exacerbate, which is our also other favorite thing to say. If you do not establish that a problem is person-made, it is cognitively inconsistent to believe it could be person-fixed. People do things. There's no such thing as systems or structures. There are people making decisions, and those people have addresses. You cannot build in people, you guys are organizers, many of you. You cannot build a hunger in people for a different demand if it's not clear that there is a decision maker. Name villains explicitly, put them in the subject position, addresses the listener as an agent, ends with a call to action. So this is like any narrative. Specifically in this project, what we learn is that persuadables hold both progressive and reactionary views of race. Staying quiet on race is letting the opposition control the field. We need to center race and racism overtly and emphasize cause and effect. We talk about race as whether you're white, black, or brown, what someone looks like, where they come from, of different races, from different places. Instead of talking about racism itself, that word, we provide the understanding of strategic racism, of how race is used as a weapon to divide us from each other so that the plutocrats can make off with more. So that we turn around and we point our finger in the wrong direction. This is what allows the whites in our audience to understand both why racial injustice is real and they feel like they aren't where they expected to be. Does that make sense? Division, coming back to what you asked, is a powerful narrative core. It is good to have a hot object. We need to break through a lot of noise. The signal to noise ratio is very hard. It's good to have a hot thing to break through, but a hot thing is also dangerous. What we found in qualitative is that the blowback that we got initially was, but you're being divisive, but you're talking about how rich people do this and politicians do that. Because of course talking about race is racist and talking about division is divisive and both sides do it, right? What we found to guard against the oven gloves that we have in these narratives against the heat, like to protect ourselves from the heat of using division, which is good heat, is to begin our messages in unity, to return to unity, and to return to it again. In these messages that there are 3 times where we talk about no matter our differences, we all want similar things. That's unity to start. Then we introduce that they're dividing us. Then we come back to when we join together across races, when we stand up for each other, we can have a government that works for all. That's how we cushion against that charge. Does that make sense? We need to frame the problem in collective terms to see desire for collective solutions. Economic justice messages are basically all permutations of a problem statement that says something akin to people are having trouble making ends meet. That's sort of the core story. That's fine. But because it's the pathology of our culture that trouble making ends meet is an individual problem. That's because you aren't doing the right things, right? So when we see people in the fight for 15, they're saying, if you want to be paid $15 an hour, why are you working at McDonald's? You should go back to school. You should get a better job, right? Everything comes back to what did you do wrong or right. The central problem posited in these messages is division, which is by definition a social problem. Therefore, we are priming people with the expectation of a social solution. We need to connect unity and collective action to government, and we need to, as I said before, combat cynicism. Where this leaves us, and I think some of these, if you're like, where the heck did that come from? It comes from a lot of other questions that we split sampled and we tested that I didn't show you. This is in your cheat sheet. I'm trying to see if there's anything that needs explanation. Well, we'll leave this up here. Oh, let me just explain this. It's always better to talk about the creation of good and not the amelioration of harm. Right? Martin Luther King did not get famous for saying, I have a complaint. Nor did he get famous for saying, I have a multi-bulleted list of policy proposals. There has to be a dream. Like, you have to be for a thing. Yeah? So that's the story, and I'm going to have Anika come up here and tell you what is happening next from the Demos end, and then the minutes that are left, you can ask questions.
All right, so this is a fake microphone. It's just so the video can hear me, but so before we get into Q&A, I just want to let you know, how do you connect with this work after today? I know that you all aren't strategic messengers by trade, but you actually are, right? You don't have to be in a public media space to have this be of use to you. You can talk to people on the plane. You can talk to people at your dinner table. You can talk to your in-laws. As she said, we need the activists, the advocates to be talking to our base. So after today, we're here and available for you if you want to send us your door-knocking scripts, your press releases, a blog to make sure that you're incorporating this into your work. We're also going to be creating a video so that we can test this on social media. So there's going to be more refinement of where this research takes place. So really excited about that as well. So again, please reach out to us. We want to also host a training where there's time for breakout. How do we talk about race? Because it's very personal, right? And just having the data is one step, right? How do we actually have these really uncomfortable conversations? And so we want to come back and do like a half-day training with y'all where we can really dig in deep and get this work happening out in your state. So you can contact us at rcn@demos.org or rcn@demosaction for the C4 side. It's in your handout, super accessible on our website, and yeah. Ready for Q&A now. Yeah.
Anat, could I ask a question? Just real quick, and I'll give the mic to someone else. Many of the people in this room speak like they're a part of church and they're part of clergy. And some of the questions I think I heard earlier is what I thought I heard is, why can't the truth just be enough, right? So, because you're telling that we're not telling untruths.
And neither are any of these messages untrue.
Right, exactly.
I'm not a believer in telling untruths.
Right, exactly. So, with getting comfortable with this new way of telling the truth, and I think, you guys talked about maybe coming back and training. Indiana in general, a lot of people here, I don't mean to generalize, so I apologize. We don't like to stick out too much. Like if a black person talks about race here, they're angry. If a white person talks about race, they're deluded. And they're playing the race card. And you just kind of get shut down. You're right. So you hit on it a little bit, but could you go into that a little bit further? How to get past being shut down in our messaging and equipping us to kind of have a response that progresses what we're trying to say instead of just responding to the remarks that are being shared on the other side. Is that clear?
It is clear, but it's in some ways the question is a little bit disturbing because that's what I just spent 45 minutes telling you, according to me. So what we see, and I haven't shown it to you, another message that we tested was a racial justice message, which is a more traditional approach to talking about racial justice, not in this race class way. And it does very badly, right? Not surprisingly in Indiana. It does well in California. The reactivity that you're talking about makes perfect sense. We don't see that reactivity in these messages. That's what we're telling you, that the messages are working with persuadables. They don't work with the opposition, but nothing about you, Francine, as a human works with the opposition, right? Like your existence doesn't work. So you can't have them. Like I can barely have them. So what I'm saying is that we built these messages to deal with that problem. Like that was the idea. And these messages are intended as proactive messages. Now, what some people have requested is a longer thing that's like, they say this, we say that. They say this, we say that. I've resisted that, and the reason that I've resisted that is because it doesn't matter what they say. The answer is still the same answer. Whatever they say, you still say this. That always is the answer. You should be very tired. We need to say fewer things, but say them more often. How long do you think Just Do It has been Nike's slogan? Do you think that the PR people at Nike would like to slit their throats before they have to type Just Do It again? Do you think they are bored? I think they're bored. Do you think they're going to make a new slogan? I do not think so either. So we need to say fewer things. We need to say them more often. We should be very bored of them. Very, very bored. If you guys are not very bored of saying families first, families first, families first, you have not said it enough. And even if you are bored, you still haven't said it enough. It should be very boring. Like, you should have to pretend like you aren't saying it for the first time. Yeah, so I don't know what to tell you other than...
No, I just wanted you to expand on that.
Oh, okay.
That was it.
You were just basically a plant.
Yes.
Gotcha.
Why, in the message several times, said greedy lobbyists?
Yeah.
And you thought that was more effective than just saying lobbyists.
Yeah.
Can you explain that, please?
Yes, that's a great question. So one of the other issues, it's in the longer version of Say This, Don't Say That. It is not here because I was running out of room on the page. So coming to this does not help me. One of the other issues that we contended with, and we frequently contend with besides the both sides issue, is what I like to call the not all Olympics. So we get not all rich people, not all white people, not all, right? So it was definitely the not all Olympics in our focus groups, for example. And what we find is that naming people, so first of all, it's problematic to say the wealthy, to take a different example, or the lobbyists. With the lobbyists, the issue with that is that there's this entire framework of like special interests, and special interests to the opposition and to many persuadables means labor unions, or means Planned Parenthood, or means, you know, the NAACP. Like, those are special interests, according to them. So the reason, I'm sorry, the reason that we say to say few is in order to guard against that not all problem, that we don't mean all wealthy people. And the reason that we recommend greedy, or we say the wealthy who rig the rules, is that it's more effective whenever we can to name by the action they're taking as opposed to the category they occupy. It's not the being a lobbyist even, although this is a tough case. You know, a lot of the organizations we love have lobbyists. It's not the being a lobbyist that's a problem. It's not the being a business that's a problem. It's not even being wealthy to a certain degree that's the problem. It's how you are behaving with that power. And so we want, to the extent possible, this is in essence sort of a love the sin or hate the sin kind of a thing. We want to name by the action they're taking as opposed to the category they occupy. Does that make sense?
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thanks so much for being here. This is extraordinary.
Oh, thank you.
Cutting to the chase, we've got a very vulnerable Democratic senator candidate, Joe Donnelly.
I realized.
Have you found some way to pipe this message to his staff?
He'll be here in an hour, or they'll be here in an hour. Yeah.
Anat, I just realized, you know, we spent a lot of the portion of today's 2 hours talking about how we shouldn't start with the message that's status quo message. We shouldn't repeat the opposition message. But I found it interesting that you started by sharing Mike Braun's message. And I wonder if, like, when it comes to maybe persuading a middle, that there's something wrong, you know, like, I think of a lot of people in Fort Wayne that don't know that anything's wrong. I don't think they're part of our opposition. I just think they're kind of uninformed, persuadable.
Yeah.
So do you still have to somehow call out what is wrong, even if you don't make note of any particular quote or person?
It's fine to tell your base what's wrong. It's really not a good idea. The reason that I showed you that for context is because I just rest assured that you guys are the base. You don't want to give Mike Braun more airtime. Like, his, you know, the super PACs behind him, they got, I mean, dude's rich. Like, let's not, I mean, I gave him airtime. I feel bad about that, right? Yeah, definitely not. And even with your base, the problem with your base, and it's a problem that I'm aware of when I do presentations, because we need to think of the base as our choir, we need to remember that we need to equip the base not merely with what they like, but with what we want them to repeat. And we are kidding ourselves if we say, you know, this is really upsetting, it's really horrible, it's really atrocious, and we see our base engaging with us on that, because they will. I'm not going to lie to you, they will. The base is more, and the more activist the base, the more that they really, the only people who want more problems are the base, like the real activist base. They are like, more problems, awesome. Like children in cages at the border, I will engage with that. I personally will engage with that, and so will you. The problem is that that's what they share on social media. They share the problems, and it's like, oh my God, team problems, team America great again. Team everything is a steaming pile of shit. There's swearing. You have? Well, or you don't know what it means. You should hear how my children are like, Mommy said the S word 5 times, and Mommy said the F word 4 times. Yeah. It's the best way to make sure your children don't swear, because my children are like, why are you talking that way? That's like how moms talk. That's what they tell their friends. They're like, that's like mom talk.
I've realized that, like, with people my age, they'll watch the news and they'll get that snippet off the news, and then that's what they want to talk about without even knowing the whole thing, but that's it, no matter what it is. So that's why I get what you said, like, don't relay a message, like, for somebody to talk about. Relay what you want them to talk about.
Yes. Remember that you're not merely luring people in, you're trying to decide what you want them to repeat. You have to look at the base as the vessel toward the persuadables. And you know, this applies more broadly. So for example, when we're going to lobby on the Hill, or whatever when you're going to the state legislature here, I get this question all the time. It's very interesting, whatever, but when I'm talking to policymakers, for those of you who do that kind of thing, this doesn't work with policymakers. First of all, contrary to popular belief, policymakers are people. I know there's not a lot of evidence, but I'm sticking by that claim. And what that means is that they also have human brains that process information and come to judgments in ways that are sort of shared with other Homo sapiens, theoretically. And so first of all, this thing that we've developed in advocacy where, no, but when you go to the lawmaker, you need to present them the fact sheet. When you go to the lawmaker, you need to have reasoned policy arguments. You need to stop taking your policy out in public. It is unseemly. So the other thing I would say, and it's in Messaging This Moment, that sort of core advice, and I usually tell it through this analogy, when you go to the grocery store and you're walking through the aisles and you get to where the instant dessert thing is, and you see the Duncan Hines Betty Crocker box for brownies, what's on the picture of the box? Brownies. And when you buy the box and you open the box, are there brownies inside the box? What's in the box? Powder. And on the back of the box, there's instructions, a recipe. We love to sell the instructions. We're very fond of talking about instructions. We're very keen on instructions. We need to sell the brownie. So we know that when we tell people, we ask them, do you think that we should raise the federal minimum wage? The majority of Americans agree. When we say, should everyone be paid enough to provide for their family, more people agree. When we say, everyone should have paid family medical leave, people agree. When we say, you're there the first time your newborn smiles, more people agree. Sell the brownie. Stop selling the recipe. The policy is the recipe. Don't take it out in public. Sell the beautiful tomorrow. When the policy is enacted, imagine that, and then that's what the world is like, and that's what you sell. For those of you who want to get more deeply into this, my best recommendation is to watch the Gael Garcia Bernal movie about the end of the Chilean dictatorship. It's just called No. About the referendum they had to run to get Pinochet ousted. No. Yeah. Stop selling the recipe.
So we have 1 minute left. We have a quick question.
And then we have to change over.
Yeah, I think that it deals more with what you were talking about. My area is racial justice and racial, anti-racism education. And so I'm wondering if you are coming back to offer, how to talk about racism conversation, if half a day is enough, when the data just showed that racial justice is a non-starter in Indiana.
Yeah, let's stop.
I mean, what I would say to that, you know, the Anika's answer is the right answer. Let's talk. Talking about racism in and of itself, unfortunately, the memo did not get to people that racism is prejudice plus power. And when I say didn't get to people, I don't just mean white people. People have a fundamental misunderstanding of what racism means. They think racism means interpersonal beef between two people of different colors. That poster that you have in your office that's like institutional racism, structural racism, colorblind racism, people don't have that poster. They didn't get that poster. So what we're saying here is that rather than say that is, for example, our opponents are racist against blah, 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 our opponents point the finger at XYZ for our hard times. Our opponents shame and blame such and such for the problems that their greed and their policies have created. What this is a pointing out of strategic racism, of how racism is used as a weapon to create economic harm that is, of course, visited more squarely upon communities of color, but affects people across races. All right. Racism, I'm giving you information, I'm not giving you a talking point. Yeah. Racism is a divide and conquer weapon that a handful of wealthy elites have used to divide us from each other, to distract us into blaming the wrong people, into blaming each other, so that we will be fighting amongst ourselves, saying that it's your fault, when really it's Mike Pence's fault, right? Oh, whoops. Well, I know, C3, C4. I'm a walking C4 violation. It's very hard. C3 violation. Okay. Okay.